You're listening to the Whole Hog Sports Podcast. And now, here's your host, Matt Jones.
Basketball tonight at Bud Walton Arena, 8 o'clock tip-off between Arkansas and South Carolina. This game going to be on SEC Network. Mike Morgan, the former voice of the Gamecocks, going to be on play-by-play. John Sunvold will be the color analyst on the game tonight. All eyes here are on Carter Knox and whether or not Carter Knox is going to be able to play for the Razorbacks. Of course, he had that hip pointer over the weekend against Auburn. The SEC availability report that was put out last night says that Carter Knox is probable for the game. So John Calipari on his coach's show Monday night said he had not practiced that day. I would suspect, I don't know this, but I would suspect that if he is listed as probable on Tuesday night, he probably went through Tuesday's practice. I don't think that they would list him as probable if he didn't practice. Mm-hmm. One of the big stories, or one of the storylines, I guess, if you will, going into this game is that Carter Knox's brother, Kobe, is on the team at South Carolina. Transferred there from South Florida, I believe.
Yep.
Prior to this season, Anthony Kristensen's here with me. Anthony,
Hello.
You talked to Kobe
I did.
This week.
Yesterday.
What's the feeling there about potentially playing against his brother? I would think that this is a big night for the Knox family, regardless of whether Carter plays, but certainly that makes a big difference whenever you've got both of them in the game.
Yeah, no, I think everybody in the Knox family seems really excited. I only talked to Kobe, and he's definitely excited. Those guys, especially when Kevin went off to college and then into the NBA. It was Carter, Kobe, and their younger sister, Ashley, who actually just signed with Auburn a few months ago. So very, very skilled family. But yeah, so I mean, those guys really, helped each other in their own growth and development. And, I didn't get to talk to Carter for the story, obviously, because I think they're trying to keep him a little under wraps and everything. But just, I guess, keep South Carolina guessing as much as you can. Mind games, whatever. But Kobe seemed really excited. He said that he had talked to Carter on the phone and just to check up on him after the Auburn game, and they when Kobe committed to South Carolina, they already were talking about how they're going to play against each other. So I think everybody's excited. The Knox family is going to be there. They're going to be wearing split jerseys. Kobe told me just. Those half and half jerseys. So it'll be fun. I'm sure it'll be an interesting matchup. Kobe's been a big part of what South Carolina has done offensively and all of that. So, but yeah, I mean, he didn't come out and explicitly say, oh yeah, he's Carter's going to be good to go. But just based on vibes, that's just kind of how I read it. Maybe I was reading it wrong, so I don't want to put out yeah, he's definitely going to play, because I don't know. He, like you mentioned, he was listed as probable, so more likely than not that he'll go. But especially with an availability report, if they were more questioning whether or not he was going to do it, I think they would have labeled him as questionable or doubtful. But yeah, so I think prediction: Carter Knox will play. I don't know that he starts, but I'll predict that he'll play, and it'll be a fun evening for the Knox family, for sure.
And for those who don't know, Kevin Knox, because I think some people know, but most people probably know this, but Kevin Knox played for John Calipari at Kentucky. He was a lottery pick of the New York Knicks. I don't think he's in the NBA right now. I think he might be in the G League with the Bulls. But he was, I think he was SEC Freshman of the Year whenever he played for Kentucky in 2000. Will that be 18?
I believe 2018.
That's correct,
yeah.
I think was the year. He was the SEC Freshman of the Year. So lot of, as there tends to be a lot of times with Calipari, a lot of connectivity past just the current player.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, you look at the amount of guys that he's coached their dads too. Billy Richmond, obviously an example of that. DJ Wagner, an example of that. And yeah, I mean, it's a built-in connection that helps with recruiting, I'm sure. So, and yeah, I mean, those guys will obviously, if they had a good experience, they'll put in a good word, I'm sure. And I'm sure it's cool for the older, I guess, the older people to see their sons or brothers or whoever play for the same coach.
I wonder if there's ever been an instance, or if there ever could be, of where people have children at a younger age. Like if a coach stays in it long enough, does he ever coach somebody's granddad?
I don't know, man. That's a long time. I certainly don't know of anybody who's done that, but that'd be kind of funny.
It'd be different.
Right? Yeah, it'd be like, yeah, I remember when your dad was a baby.
Yeah.
It's like oh, you retire, buddy. Come on.
Arkansas, I think I saw the line was 11.5
Mm-hmm.
for this game tonight, and I would assume that includes some uncertainty about Carter Knox, which he makes
Mm-hmm.
a difference on this team. We saw that against Auburn. It feels like the type of game where Arkansas ought to go out there and I don't know if bludgeon is the right word, but they ought to be able to beat this South Carolina team handily. Now, whether or not they'll do it, we'll see. I don't know what kind of impact it makes on, or what kind of impact the crowd makes on the game. I don't think it's going to be a great crowd tonight. I mean, it's kind of cold. You got a cold front that's continuing to move in here today. It's
I was
an
walking my dog. I was shivering. First time in a while.
Yeah, I would say it's seasonably cold, although it feels unseasonably cold the way that the weather's been
Yeah,
here
it's like, oof.
lately. But it's the 8 o'clock tip off on a work night too, and that seems to keep some people away. So I don't know what the energy is going to be like in the arena. But you would think that if all things are equal, Arkansas ought to be able to come out and beat this team handily, and they need a good bounce back night. I mean, after what happened against Auburn, we heard all the cliches the other day: burn the tape, not my team, this, that. They need a good bounce back performance tonight. I think to feel good about themselves going into this weekend when they're going to play a really good Georgia team on their home court.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's South Carolina is among the bottom teams in the SEC, and at least on paper, they're 1-2 in the league. The one win is against LSU, and LSU's athletics director came out today and basically said, Matt McMahon's on the hot seat there. So, it's a tough situation there. But they got that win on the road, so that's obviously a big time result. And they lost to Vanderbilt, which everybody loses to Vanderbilt nowadays. Pretty handily. I think it was a 13-point game, 12-point game at home. And then they gave Georgia a really good game. It was a home game for South Carolina, but looked at for a good portion of that game like they were going to win or had a chance to win. Ended up losing by 5, but I mean it's a team that can give games to a lot of these teams, and if you're not ready to play, they can beat you. They like to get to the free throw line, and they're a very good free throw shooting team as well. They're also good at getting the ball inside and scoring those easy points. So it's a team that can hurt you in different ways. They like to slow you down on offense, so slow you down when they're on defense and you're on offense. So it'll be interesting to see because Arkansas obviously likes to play at a pretty decent tempo and especially try to get out in transition. So it'll be an interesting little chess match to see who comes out on top there. But yes, Arkansas is a team that you would expect to get a win in this game, at least on paper. But yeah.
Well, and we talked about the Knox angle. That being a storyline, another storyline, Nick Pringle playing his former team.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. We didn't get to talk to Nick about it, but he's mature. John Calipari mentioned it, on the radio show the other night that it's not something that he's really talked about with him, just because Nick Pringle he's been around the block. It's not going to be the only time he plays against a former team this season because obviously he was at Alabama as well, so that'll be a little bit of a homecoming for him whenever they go down to Tuscaloosa, I guess. But yeah, no, that's another interesting angle. Obviously, he was there last season, and South Carolina didn't have a great year by any means at all. But he was a big piece of what they were doing there, and almost, a lot of the success that South Carolina had went through Colin Murray-Boyles, who obviously is in the NBA now, but Nick Pringle was a big part of that as well. So it'll be interesting to see how I guess he reacts to that. I'm sure he's an experienced guy, so he's going to I'm not anticipating him getting overwhelmed with emotions, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
What do people need to know about South Carolina? Like what would make what could South Carolina do in this game tonight that would give Arkansas trouble?
I think frustrating Arkansas when South Carolina is on defense is kind of the way that I guess South Carolina would have success in this game. Like I said earlier, they like to slow you down and kind of make you think, I guess is the right way to put it. the defense, offensively and defensively, they're just kind of middle of the pack in the country, I guess. But yeah, and then you switch it over to just the conference only, and they're both, offense and defense is on the lower end. It's not like bottom statistically, but it's lower end of the SEC. But I think South Carolina defensively can frustrate you. I think we saw that with Georgia. Georgia went into that game as the top scoring team in the country on average, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they like to slow you down. Georgia, not that Georgia and Arkansas are necessarily similar teams, but they both like to play fast. They both like to get down in transition. And, I thought South Carolina did a really nice job of frustrating Georgia in that game. So, I would imagine that they'll try to do a lot of the same things in that one. I didn't get to watch the full game because we had to get to Neville Arena. But, I thought they did a really nice job of, limiting Georgia's looks in transition and slowing them down. So I think that's probably the key to the game for South Carolina is slowing Arkansas down offensively and limiting transition opportunities.
They've got this Michi Johnson, who we've seen a number of times before. The first time, because this is the second time that he's transferred to South Carolina from Ohio State.
Yep.
The first time that he transferred, this would have been during the Musselman years. He scored like 20 during a game, and I think Arkansas might have hit a shot late to beat him in Columbia. I can't remember exactly how all that went down, but I remember Michi being very tough for Arkansas to stop in that game. Now, I think there have been some other games that he's played against Arkansas where it didn't go quite so well for him. But, I mean, he's playing well this year. I'm looking at the stats here, about 14 points a game, 3.5 rebounds, 4 assists. It seems like he's kind of certainly not Darius Acuff, but he's kind of their version of Darius Acuff, that as he goes, so goes the team.
Yeah, no, he's a big part of what they do. A couple of years ago when South Carolina made it to the NCAA tournament and had a really unexpectedly good season, he was right at the center of just about everything they were doing. So he's an experienced guy. This is his 6th year of college basketball, his 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, at South Carolina with a second stop at Ohio State along the way. So
it's wild.
It is. It's.
I wonder how many.
Have you seen? You watch The Office, right?
I do. I have.
Yeah, it's snip, snap, snip, snap.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the Michi Johnson transfer story. But he's a good player, right? I mean, he can hurt you in a few different ways. He's not like the most lethal 3-point shooter in the country, but he's a good driver. I think you mentioned his assists. He's got I think he's the top quarter in the country in assist rate. So he's a guy who can distribute. He plays a lot of minutes. He's a guy who, he can hurt you in a lot of different ways, and he has throughout his long career of college basketball. But yeah.
There's a lot. I mean, there are instances. I would probably even say several instances where players have gone back to a school. Mm-hmm. Even here at Arkansas, Jimmy Witt, Arkansas to SMU, back to Arkansas, for totally different reasons. Sunday Adebayo in the 1990s, he had to go to Memphis, and then the NCAA said we messed up, and he was able to come back to Arkansas. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody go from one school, like school A to school B, back to school A, back to school B. I think that this, of all the very interesting, unique things that you see in this transfer era, it's
a unique one.
This might be unique to itself.
Yeah, and I don't know the full story around it, so I'm sure there's a reason he wanted to. Obviously, he started at Ohio State. There's a reason he went to South Carolina, and then I'm sure there's a reason he went back and then back again. But yeah, I don't know all the reasonings behind it. I'm sure he had some reason he wanted to go back and forth and whatnot. But yeah, it is unique, and I think the internet has started to call whenever a guy goes one school to another school and then back to that school and then back to the other school. I think it's now internet lingo to call that a Michi.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know the full story behind it, but it is certainly unique and it's certainly interesting.
Hey, we want to tell you about Bentonville Glass. They're committed, professional, and versatile. They've been serving their community since 1971. You can learn more at bentonvilleglass.com or stop by and see them at their location at 507 South Main in Bentonville. They've got all your glass market needs with the highest quality products. South Carolina is a team that is not very tall. I mean, I think they might be top third in the NCAA in terms of height, but certainly like they're in the hundreds, I think, in terms of height. This is
117, yeah.
So I mean, this is going to be one of the you would think for Arkansas that you might have some advantages there in the post.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've got Mike Sharavamts. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Everybody just calls him Mongolian Mike. He's the first ever Mongolian citizen to play Division I men's basketball, which is a neat story. I got to talk to him a little bit at SEC Media Days, and he's a good kid and everything like that. I feel old whenever I say that sentence too.
You're not old.
He's a good kid.
But go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, he's a guy, he's 6'9". He's one of the bigger guys on the team. He plays, a lot of the minutes, and he's going to be, I guess, the primary post presence. He's a good rebounder on the defensive end. Offensive rebounding is not necessarily South Carolina's strength by any means. It kind of mirrors Arkansas a little bit. Neither of these teams are necessarily great rebounding teams, so it'll be interesting to see how those teams kind of attack the glass and go about that. But I mean, yeah, he's a guy who can do that. He's a guy who defensively is not, he's not necessarily the best shot blocker, but he can block shots. They've got Chris Insendoko. I can't talk today. He's a 7-footer who doesn't play a ton. Kind of same thing with Jordan Butler. He's kind of the guy off the bench for South Carolina, and he's another 7-foot guy. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of size on the team. They've got a lot of like middle of the road height guys, like your 6'5", 6'6" area, 6'7", and those. It's not like they're small, but they're not big. They've got Eli Ellis coming off the bench. He's listed at 6 foot. He's probably closer to my height, but he's been effective for them. And you would expect Arkansas to have the size advantage, especially in the paint, for sure.
Not a good 3-point shooting team.
No,
like 32%, I think.
Yep. Yeah, it's not great. So you look at that. I mean, Arkansas defensively has been an okay-ish 3-point defense. There have been nights where I think obviously that hasn't necessarily been the case. You look at the Winthrop game for an example of that. But, Arkansas, I think if you can limit the looks inside for South Carolina and kind of force them into a perimeter game, I think that's kind of defensively what you want. Obviously, you're going to contest the threes and everything, but, then it kind of also becomes a rebounding game, which neither team has been a great rebounding team. But yeah, not a great 3-point shooting team. I think you look at South Carolina's roster. Like, I don't believe there's anybody who shoots over 33% from three this season. Which it's unless you want to count Christian Esendoko. Jeez, I can't talk. But he's only attempted 11 3-pointers this season, and it's. Yeah, it's not a great 3-point shooting team, but teams can get hot. I think we've obviously seen that at Bud Walton Arena this season. But yeah, I think you would want to if South Carolina is resorting to 3-pointers, I think you're going to live with that.
What's happened at South Carolina? Because 2 years ago, Lamont Paris was the SEC Coach of the Year. I mean, he was talk of the town. I think he got his extension, and then it's just it has tanked since that point. We've seen this before. I mean, I think Gates at Missouri, Dennis Gates, he had kind of a similar thing, right, where they were bad.
Gates at Missouri is kind of a weird one because they were really good year one, really bad year two,
but then they
bounced. Then they were really good last year, and then now they're the jury's out. But yeah,
it's just I don't know. Like I guess maybe I see a little bit of similarities there between what happened with Gates and maybe what's happening with Paris. Maybe that's why I tried to make that comparison. But it's. I kind of felt watching South Carolina a couple of years ago that because it was unexpected. What, they picked 14th in the SEC, I think that
so,
year?
Yeah.
And maybe it was just kind of maybe that year was more of a one-off versus what you could expect from them. But still, it has been interesting because there was so much excitement, I guess, and hype, if you will, about South Carolina's basketball program. And then the last couple of years, it's really fallen off. Last year, they were the worst team in the SEC. They took Arkansas to the woodshed and gave them a tough game in Nashville at the SEC tournament. But for the most part, they weren't real competitive.
Yeah, no, it's a weird. I mean, I'm not inside the South Carolina program, so I don't know all of the ins and outs. But South Carolina is historically, I mean, it's not like it's the best men's basketball school in the country. I know they've got the Final Four that they got under Frank Martin, those years ago. I don't remember exactly what year
It was
that
2017.
Yeah, I was in high school. But yeah, it's I don't know where South Carolina men's basketball stacks up in the SEC with regard to NIL or revenue sharing, because
That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And you look at South Carolina just kind of, I guess, institutionally, obviously football is going to be the king just about everywhere in the SEC. That's in
Everywhere but Kentucky.
Yeah, so you've got that, but then you've got the women's basketball program there is obviously a huge deal. Dawn Staley is everything Dawn Staley is. She's incredible. And then, baseball is obviously a big deal there as well. So, and I know they didn't have the year they wanted last year, but
they haven't had the year they wanted for several years in a row now.
But where does the men's basketball program, I guess, fall in that hierarchy? I'm not 100% sure. It could very well be second. Yeah.
Tennessee's different now, but for a long time Tennessee was this way, where the women's program, they would outdraw the men. UConn, again, it's not necessarily that way now because the men have been so good recently, but that's one of those other programs. South Carolina, LSU right now with Kim Mulkey. I mean, LSU women's basketball is a bigger deal, I think, at least in terms of the people who show up, and certainly in terms of production. South Carolina would be in that mix too. It's something that we've never, here in Arkansas, we've never really seen that up close and personal. But I would think that whenever you're there on the ground, that is a dynamic that's in play.
Yeah, I mean, all those programs that you mentioned, obviously they're very successful in the women's basketball field, and Kim Mulkey's done a great job, and obviously Dawn Staley is potentially up there with Gino Auriemma as one of the best coaches ever. So it's where does the men's basketball program fall in terms of NIL giving or revenue sharing? Could it be second? Sure. I'm not entirely sure where it falls, just because I don't have those figures, but I think regardless, it's probably still, even if it is second in line to football, it's probably not going to be on the same level playing field as say Arkansas, for example, with regard to the donations, because those other programs, football, baseball, and women's basketball, the success that they've had in the past obviously is going to, I guess, take away. I don't. That feels like the wrong phrasing, but yeah, it's those programs need that too, and I'm not sure where the South Carolina men's basketball program falls in that hierarchy.
I think you touched on this a minute ago, but like the contrast in styles between these two teams is kind of interesting. Where South Carolina, they want to slow it down and use the shot clock, and obviously we've seen Arkansas, when it's at its best, is really good in transition.
Yeah, no, for sure, and it'll be an interesting, I guess, chess match, if you will. I know that's kind of a cliche.
It's like a tug of war. I mean, so often it's about who gets to dictate their style and their pace. It's like that's what the first 5, 8, 10 minutes of the game really is. It's a tug of war of can we impose what we want to do on you, or like, are you the hammer or are you the nail? And whoever's the hammer, they're going to be the ones that have a pretty good chance of winning that game at the end.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I look back at the Michigan State game, and obviously Michigan State and South Carolina are kind of in different worlds with regard to where they stand right now. Yeah, and
coaching.
And Michigan State obviously really slowed Arkansas down in that game, and kind of forced them into a more half-court game, which Arkansas, and obviously this is early season, so maybe it's a moot point, but
it is a good illustration of that's what South Carolina would like to be able to do to Arkansas tonight.
Yes, but even South Carolina likes to try to play even slower than that. I mean, they're right now, I think, in adjusted tempo, they're 307. Just they like to slow the game down. Their offense, it's very methodical, likes to play deep into the shot clock, and looks for the best look as opposed to the first look, which not that Arkansas looks for the first look as opposed to the best look, but you know what I mean. They're methodical, they're slow, and they're comfortable in those moments, I guess is the best way I can put it. and does that lead to problems? I'm sure at points it does. Just like, if you're trying to play too fast, it obviously leads to problems as well. But yeah, I think South Carolina is obviously going to try to slow things down and make it difficult for Arkansas to get out and transition and kind of take advantage of the speed, the athleticism that Arkansas probably has something of an advantage over South Carolina in.
If Carter Knox can't start, or let's even say that he's not able to play much, where do the minutes come from? Is it Richmond? Is it somebody else?
I would think Richmond, yeah, because I think he's the natural, I guess, replacement in the starting five. But do you want to take
Well, you go back to like
his...
Tennessee, the Tennessee game. Calipari said afterward that Billy Richmond didn't get a whole lot of minutes in that game because of how well Carter Knox was playing. So,
yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I guess there are other factors that could play into this, but that's kind of where my mind went.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I mean, that's an option. I think for sure. I think Billy Richmond is the most, I guess, obvious candidate for it. And he's obviously he can be very effective, and I think his energy plays in a game like this where the opposing team is going to try to slow things down and kind of murky the waters, if you will. I think that those energy plays can be a big factor, and kind of bring everybody else up. But you could also see maybe they run out a 3-guard lineup with Darius Acuff, DJ Wagner, and Malik Thomas. I think that's possible.
Maybe try push tempo.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that I think
of course,
that
Billy
is exactly.
Billy Richmond can push tempo, right?
Yes, no, for sure.
A little bit.
But yeah, I think that's an option. So there's a few different ways they can go. But if you were asking me to make a prediction, I would think Billy Richmond will probably eat most of those minutes.
Good stuff. Anthony will be there. I'll be there too tonight. You can read all of our
Drink your
coverage.
coffee.
Yeah, and you're going to need it. Yeah. Hopefully we get the officials. Hopefully we get the officials that'll swallow their whistle a little bit. That's always the worst. The 8:00 game with the officials who want to call,
love blowing the whistle
Yes.
and calling fouls.
yeah,
It's
who like to see 90
ridiculous.
free throws in a game.
Yeah, if we get if it's
Was it Texas last year? Was that the game?
I think that, and then
Where it was an
the,
8:00 tip off, and there were,
just like,
and then it went to overtime.
And
it went to overtime, and
Trey Johnson was crazy in that
I think
game.
it was about about 11:15 when the game ended, or something like
or
that.
if it's the officials crew from the Vanderbilt Alabama game, it's over. I'm gonna be falling asleep. I'll be upset.
A lot of SEC games tonight. I think there's 5 SEC games tonight. Arkansas, South Carolina, one of them. SEC Network, 8:00 tonight. WholeHogSports.com. We'll have all of our coverage there, and we'll be back tomorrow to look back at the game. Have a good day, everybody.